We just witnessed a drone strike deep inside Russia that hit an industrial facility that builds military parts for Russia. It's a vivid demonstration of how Ukraine is gaining initiative and applying pressure on Putin's war machine. This new development clearly shows that Russia is far from invincible. Ukraine is finally pushing back and targeting facilities that support Russia's military, and now Ukraine is exposing cracks in Moscow's defenses. Ukrainian drones struck a major factor in Karachev, in Russia's Bryansk Oblast. The Bryansk region lies just north of the Ukrainian border, and Karachev is about 115 kilometers from that border. The factory is not an ordinary civilian production factory. It produces electrical connectors and components used across Russia's military and industrial sectors. Most of the produced parts from this factory are used in Russia's military antennas, circuit boards, and measuring systems. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, the strike was carried out via Neptune cruise missiles deployed in coordination with missile, artillery, and other branches of Ukraine's armed forces. Drones have also played a major role on the battlefield in favor of Ukraine. Local media in Russia initially reported explosions at the site, and the Russian regional governor had earlier warned of possible missile threat in Karachev. That threat has now been realized, and the outcome was devastating for the Kremlin. The full damage is still being assessed, but the fact that Ukraine could reach and damage this facility demonstrates several key shifts in their military capabilities. They are increasing their precision and their boldness by targeting Russian sites like this. Now, this is not the first time Ukraine has struck deep in Russia, but each success brings them a little bit closer to forcing Putin to finally surrender and end this war. By hitting a factory that produces components for Russian military, Ukraine is going after the arteries of Putin's war machine. These are the essential targets that have a larger impact than you may think. Damage to these components can ripple downstream, slowing or degrading Russia's weapons production, its maintenance, and its ability to replace losses. Karachev is not anywhere near the front line, so when Ukraine shows that it can conduct a missile or drone attack this far inside Russia, it serves as proof that its capabilities are becoming far stronger than anticipated. It forces Russia to divert resources to a defensive posture, rather than exclusively carrying out offensive attacks. Russia must now allocate more air defense resources for facilities farther from the front lines. This is a massive resource drain for the Kremlin as they try to shift the war back into their favor. Moscow's ability to concentrate forces on Ukraine's front lines may now be diluted. This essentially means that Ukraine is making Russia fight a war on multiple fronts at the same time. They are promoting their war efforts in Ukraine to their own population, but they're also trying to covertly defend inside Russia territory without the knowledge of that spreading to their own people. This would look terrible for Putin, and he doesn't want his people to know that that's what's really happening on the battlefield. For American interests, it also helps make the case that continued support for Ukraine is not a lost cause. It's a strategic investment to try to keep Russia at bay in Ukraine while sanctioning their economy and bringing them to the negotiating table. But so far, Putin hasn't budged, despite a recent summit with President Trump in the state of Alaska. But for Putin, he's facing deteriorating circumstances on the battlefield for the Russian military. Despite buffer zones and layered air defenses, Ukraine is still able to penetrate deep into Russian territory. That suggests either gaps in Russian detection or perhaps more likely a lack of resources. Russia depends on factories, components, and transport networks that are vulnerable to precision strikes. Ukraine is exploiting that vulnerability right now. Putin's regime is increasingly stretched in terms of military production, and there are simply not enough replacement parts and weapons to support the entire military. Putin has already brought a foreign military from North Korea in to fight the war. In addition, the Russian economy is on verge of collapse due to crippling sanctions and a lack of trading partners. Russia has also lost large percentages of its oil production capabilities due to drone strikes in various regions that have taken down those facilities. Russia had relied on the notion that certain regions inside their territory were relatively safe. Strikes like Karachev undermine that illusion. Russian factories and supply lines are now feeling the strain, and it's having devastating effects on the military's efficiency. Ukraine has repeatedly struck energy, oil, and infrastructure targets in Russia in recent months, seeking to degrade Russia's capacity to fuel its war. Ukrainian HIMARS rockets also recently struck a thermal power plant near Belgorod Oblast, causing power outages and infrastructure damage. Ukraine's intelligence also recently claimed to have eliminated several Russian drone operators in occupied territory. These successful operations show that Ukraine is not content to merely defend its own land. Ukraine is now effectively conducting offensive operations deep behind enemy lines, which is resulting in weakening Russia's ability to sustain long-term war. And that bold strategy may be the only way to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. From an American perspective, there is strong evidence that continued military aid and intelligence sharing should continue. President Trump recently indicated that he believes Ukraine should continue putting pressure on Russia, because there's a very real path to regaining territory and forcing Putin to renegotiate. So the real question is now, what will Putin do to respond? We know that Russia will do something, but what are some of the strategic possibilities that Putin could go for? Russia may intensify drone and missile attacks against Ukrainian cities and energy grids. It also wouldn't be surprising if Putin targeted civilian infrastructure to send a message. We've seen Putin target civilians with little empathy in the past, and it's become an unfortunate reality of this between Russia and Ukraine. It's one of the reasons we are constantly hearing President Trump talk about the senseless loss of life every single week, and why he has made it a major priority to try and end it for good. Moscow might alternatively rush more S-400 missile systems to regions that need to be shielded from Ukrainian strikes. That would stretch Russia's resources even more, but it might temporarily slow Ukraine's ability to strike. From a diplomatic perspective, Russia may press for escalations with NATO or threat gestures to try to deter further Western support from Ukraine. These risks are very real, but the fact Ukraine is launching these strikes anyway suggests Moscow is no longer able to fully deter them. This could be a major opportunity for Ukraine, and they're trying to take advantage of it while they can. As Russia must defend more regions, it constrains their ability to shift reserve resources. The need to protect factories and supply lines, because restoring them is not easy with the existing sanctions against their company. Military production is also at a standstill, so options are relatively limited for the time being. If Ukraine continues targeting factories and supply chains, Russia's ability to replenish losses will be significantly lower than it was when the invasion started several years ago. Ukraine is steadily shifting from a purely defensive stance into an offensive campaign that strikes hard and disrupts Russian logistics. This strategy would undermine Russia's wartime infrastructure. The future of this war won't just be decided in the trenches of Donbass, but in the factories, the power plants, and the supply hubs that keep Russia's war machine running. Sanctions are choking his economy, manpower shortages are growing, his ability to replace damaged equipment depends on vulnerable factories, just like the one hit in Bryansk. Putin is running low on all three right now. And the more those factories burn, the more his war effort grinds to an annoying halt. This is also where American leadership matters. President Trump stands with Ukraine by selling weapons systems and providing intelligence, while also working with the European leaders that want to see the war come to an end. If President Trump continues to apply pressure to Putin, it's possible that he could also play a part in dragging him to the negotiating table. Only time will tell what really happens in this war. But Russia can't be satisfied with the direction things are heading right now.